You're listening to the Rogers Sporting Goods Podcast with Patrick Fisher,
Chandler Smith,
and Josh from Outdoor Limits.
In this podcast, we'll touch on everything from gear to ducks to deer, turkey and fishing. From field to table, let's dive in.
One of the biggest moments in my career was like 2008, and I was fitting, I'll leave his name out. I was fitting a very famous country music star in Nashville with Hearing, and he was a little bit older country music star, and I think I probably saw him 5-6 times, like across the fitting thing. He's coming down from his farm in Kentucky, and he never showed up sober. Like, didn't matter what time the appointment was, man. It was like, and truly, it was like a career-defining moment, because it was like the first time, and finally at the end, like we kind of got the point. He had a killer hearing loss after a long career in the industry.
It was Bradley Cooper off of his movie.
Off of the movie, no. And finally, he got there, and so we get to the point. And he's like, man, it's good. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm looking for a little. Let's go a little bit more than good, right? And he's like, no, you did a good job. And I'm like, I'm not looking for a gold star here, John. Like, this is like. And he's like, well, I go, what can we do to make it better? He's like, well, just can you warm it up a little bit? And I'm like, okay, like what do you mean warm it up? And he's like, well, it just needs a little more wood. Can you give us more wood? And I'm like, not following you, dude. Like that's not part of ear stuff right there, wood and so literally we're going back and forth like this, sitting in front of the computer, and he's like, well, like mids. Can you give it some mids? Like that, you know.
I know exactly what he says when he says warmth and wood in the audio. I kind of feel it, or you know.
And I've learned a bunch of that stuff now but I'd only been in town probably 2 years, like trying to grow this musician program there, which is actually a big part of what we could actually talk a little bit about with Tetra. But and he goes, it needs some mids. And so like in speech, we go from like 250 cycles to maybe 6,000 cycles, right? So mid frequency is kind of like 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, right? So I go to and he's looking at the whole computer program and stuff with me, and I grab the band at 2,500. He's like, no, mids. And I'm like, yeah, these are the mids. He's like, 2,500? He's like, no, you need like 5,000, 6,000. He's like, that's the mids. I'm like, dude, we're done at that point. Like, there's no speech sounds that far out. Like, we don't. And he's like, can I do that? And I just had given a final exam. I had a whole stack of freaking tests in front of me. I'm like, dude, here's the mouse. You do it. He sat like wobbling back and forth on my stool, like, and all he said was, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 1, 2, check, 1. He sat there for a freaking hour, and I just sat there grading freaking tests. And he finally pushed away, and he goes, that's badass. And I looked at it, and it looked like a chromosome. It was like almost the exact counter opposite of what we would have prescriptively done. And I looked at it, and I go, you can't like that. I go, that sounds good? He goes, that's badass. That's what I've been looking for. And it was 100% almost exact polar opposite of what all the science, and honest to God, I'm telling you, I've never forgot that moment where, like, how dare us determine how you're going to hear.
Dang.
Right? I mean, I've never forgot that moment. I wish it was sober, probably a little better science behind it, but like the idea of listening to what the customer wants and listening to what, in this case, what the patient needs. And,
right.
But it was literally 45 minutes to an hour of check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, 1.
That's cool.
Anyway.
Oh, they'll spend some time on that, getting ready for concerts or something. They'll sit there forever doing sound checks.
But so that's a big part of like the musician program and the musician products that have been out for 25 years is a fundamental part of what we're doing. That's how you have a waterfowl program that's completely different than an upland program. It's completely different than a turkey program and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
We'll get into that.
We won't tell that whole story, but
I got you. Well, everybody does have a different, level that they're at.
But when you step back and think about it, like, just because
I wonder if
100 studies
is
say,
was this musician like other musicians? Is that kind of what there was the exact opposite?
Not really saw that, but like once you kind of let them, and that was kind of how I started to practice, is like, okay, like we're going to start here, but I'm going to involve you into, some of the programming. And like when you open it up to, and in that town, like the hardest ones in Nashville are the sound engineers, which is kind of where you went on.
Yeah.
Like they could come in with like a non-disclosure agreement that I'm not allowed to talk to anyone about the findings of their hearing, right?
Yeah.
Because like
Gotcha.
if you're making $1 million mixing for, fill in the blank,
right,
for Taylor Swift, and they realize that you got a whole bunch of hearing loss, then you probably lose your expertise as a sound engineer.
Yeah.
Although you know what it sounds like. So anyway.
Yeah.
Pat, who we got here today?
For everybody listening, we've got Bill Dickenson from Tetra Hearing. So he's so is it you and David are the founding gentlemen?
Yeah, David,
I guess co-founders.
Co-founders for Tetra Hearing.
Yeah.
And it literally started over here in Missouri in the Boot Heel in a duck pit with blue skies and and a bunch of pintails flying that wouldn't even think about landing and working.
Ooh, yeah.
Sure. Of course, Chandler on the end. Josh from Outdoor Limits, as always, to my right.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know a little about Tetra, so
Yep, sure do.
You got some first-hand experience at the table.
Yeah. What year was the idea?
Literally, it was a January hunt. Well, the idea has been baking in my head. I've been carrying around this since 2006, 2007, when digital hearing aids. We went from an analog hearing aid back in the clinic days to a digital hearing aid, and we started moving from behind the ear hearing aids to in the ear hearing aids. Yeah. In kind of the mid 90s, and to be able to, I started playing with different devices in the ear and fine tuning them, kind of all through my career. Went over on the left. I was on faculty, which is where I met David over at Vanderbilt, and we became hunting and fishing buds. And he left to start a private practice. I left to go over the manufacturing side, and then for hearing aids, and got to kind of travel the globe and meet all kinds of people doing super cool stuff with sound and circuitry, and just started like always looking to build a better mousetrap, right? Of like and it was all really centered around blowing a duck call. And be able to hear your buddies and hear what's going on. When my son started hunting with me, this ability to teach him how to become a good duck hunter, and having a set of earmuffs on where he couldn't hear anything. I mean, the worst thing that we could do really is like take a young kid. Actually, the worst thing you could do is give them no protection in a duck blind. The second worst thing is you give them hearing protection when they can't hear you. And it's all about it's all about the moments outside of the trigger pulls that really kind of build a duck hunter, right?
Yeah,
and,
you're trying to teach them out there, and they can't hear anything you're telling them.
Yeah. And so if you don't have anything in their ears, what are you teaching them? That duck hunters don't put anything in their ears, that they don't protect their brains, and that's getting a little ahead of ourselves, but that's literally where it all started. So I had a pocket full of different devices that I was tweaking and messing with, and I'm not kidding you. It was David and I in a pit on a January weekend, and pintails were all over the place, but wouldn't even think of working, and he was blowing his lungs out, and I was trying these different devices, and he had a set of kind of the standard traditional in the ear devices that we've been selling in clinic to duck hunters for 20 years, and I'm trying the new ones, and I'm like, dude, I think you're way too loud. And yeah, we were in a metal pit, and he's like, no, it sounds good, right? I'm like, well, of course you think you sound good. I'm telling you, when I'm listening to this other stuff, like, it sounds really loud. And he's like, well, let me try that. And he put them in his ears and started blowing the call. He's like, God, that sounds good. And literally, that was I'd just been messing around with some different strategies on when you measure what the sound of a hen mallard comeback call or a feeding chuckle, or like those are the same. It's like a fingerprint. It's the same sound, same frequencies over and over and over again. And once you pattern that, you can then build and design an amplifier to amplify these frequencies more than other frequencies.
That's pretty cool.
That's wild.
We got like just super dorky with it, but that's really it all started.
Can you take out like natural reverb? Is that such a thing, or is that I'm probably I don't know what I'm talking about necessarily, but like,
well,
I'm thinking like crisped up the echoes and stuff.
So there's certain frequencies. So that's more on like timing when you're looking at reverberation.
Yeah.
But on that's a very good question. I've never been asked anything like that, but. That's a little bit of why we went with such a high-end circuit. I mean, the whole purpose of Tetra was to create a great listening experience, so that, I mean, for 20 or 30 years, there's plenty of devices on the market that would protect the ear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Foam plugs, ear muffs, fingers in the ear. Like you can, you can protect the ear fairly simplistically. To protect the ear and create a good listening situation has been a chicken and egg problem for a long time, and it's been that to be able to hear and monitor what's going on around you, hear the things that you don't want to hear, and so we again when hearing aids became digitized back in the 80s and 90s, and actually Bob Walker was an audiologist, and he really kind of started this whole thing about bringing sound enhancement. Making things louder in the products that also protected the ear. And the problem is that the kind of the lower end circuits and what we had at that time also created a lot of distortion. So you would get a lot of reverberation, you get a lot of sound distortion, sound saturation, and so hunters in general, but particularly waterfall hunters, wouldn't wear anything because it created a crummy listening experience. And the more that you get into it, we all know the top 3 reasons that you won't plug up your ear is you can't blow your call because your call doesn't sound good.
Yeah,
you can't talk to your buddies, right? And you can't hear what's going on around you. I mean, the cool parts is Josh listening to the dog whine and hearing the. I mean, those are all moments of it, right? It's it's having conversations with your kids and teaching a new hunter and hearing the wings ripping around, behind, and hearing the first honk as they break the tree line.
Oh yeah,
that's what gets us jazzed, right? It's a sound experience. So
when they first came out with those, was it hearing protect? It was this in-ear mechanical, but they had they were open, but they had a certain decibel they'd cut off. And it wasn't electronic; it was like a mechanical device, but it wasn't probably that great of a system. But when those first came out, I was excited because you could actually hear. And then whenever a shot fires off, it's supposed to protect your ear. I don't know if it did or not, but
it's a super keyword, supposed to.
Supposed to. That's what I don't know if it ever did, but that's what the package said. But anyways,
there's been lots of attempts, and really it's the waterfall hunter. We have the longest season. We chase them chase the migration, especially these days. There's a whole lot of guys that are hunting more mobile than just hunting, the wood duck pond in the back of Grandpa's property type thing. And so it's the most shots fired. It's the largest bag limits. And so the ears of the waterfall hunter absolutely gets the most abuse.
Yeah.
And it's typically the hunter that will refuse to wear any protection. And it really centers around the call. So
yeah. Because trap shooters will wear protection. Right.
Well, part of it is you don't get to go up on that line without eyes and ears, right?
Eyes and
so
ears.
You have somebody that's forced, or you go to any public range and you're forced to wear it, right? But you think about what's going on right now, where like that 6-year-old is in the backyard all summer, shooting the .22 with Papa, right? And every time they go back to the picnic table and they do their plinking, and someone's putting something in little Johnny's ears or putting earmuffs on, and it's all about that I get to go squirrel hunting with Grandpa this year, right? And then all of a sudden that magical Saturday opens up and you're out in the woods and there's no more hearing protection, right?
Yeah.
And think what a confusing message that is to a child, right? Like, okay, so this time when I hunt, I don't wear it, but when I pull triggers in the backyard or go shoot sporting clays, or when I target practice, I wear it, and it just like you can't make that make sense, right?
Yeah. Well, for sure.
How long have you been wearing them now, Josh?
Bill, when did you guys launch the product?
19. Yeah.
19.
Josh
So
was
2019.
Yeah.
Dang.
That might have been the first time I heard about you guys. I was at NWTF and was with Brooke, Richard from Higdon.
Yeah.
Brooke Richard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he was getting his stuff fitted, everything fitted at the show or something like that.
Exactly.
But and he was telling me all about it. So that's the first time I heard about you guys. That was pre-COVID NWTF.
It really was, man. Those are some early days. It seems like forever ago in 2 minutes at the same time. But Josh was absolutely one of my very first conversations with at that time someone that could influence, and truly I use that word. I know it's a big buzzword in marketing and sales these days, but truly what we look for is the old guy. What we don't need are more old guys, shaking their finger at, man, you can't do that to your ear. You're going to end up in a mess at the end. I wish I would have taken care of my ears better. And like, no pun intended, I just walked down the hall and had a super cool conversation with Steve Rogers, and that's how it ended. He's like, well, man, I sure wish I would have known you 40 years ago. Right? Nobody was talking about this. And
my dad says the same thing.
If I had a nickel for every time I've heard, man, I wish I would have met you. I wish before I did all this dumb stuff to my ears, and so when we use the word influencer, it's young guys like Josh that do awesome work, that gets the attention, earns the right to have the attention of young duck hunters. Matter of fact, I got to Josh through at that time. I mean, my son started watching him when he was 11 or 12 years old, and watching the work that you were doing.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, and he turns 20 next week. So when was it? Last year that we got to do a hunt together?
I think it was 2 years.
2 years ago already.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I don't know how that goes.
But this idea of, and again, the message is, and it's really going after that kind of the younger, before any damage happens, of like, you can't do this for a lifetime and expect things to end up okay, right? Like, that story doesn't end well. It's the conversation I just had with Steve Rogers, and a million times, like. If I would have known how badly it affects my life, hearing loss right now, and I'm not sharing health secrets this is right from Steve, right? Like, if I would have known the impact of hearing right now at this point in my life, I would have done smarter things along the way. And so the idea of like changing the standard and changing the conversation and setting a new standard that you need to do something to protect the hearing. We know from a health standpoint, when we look at later in life, things like Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive processing, memory loss, all that stuff, the number one predictor, a lot of that stuff is genetics, so we're just kind of screwed. It's what mom and dad gave us. Like, if you end up at 65 with Alzheimer's or dementia and that kind of health problems, about 2/3 of it is genetics, and that if we live long enough, it's going to show up. And that's kind of
right
before we had stupid words like pandemics. The global healthcare epidemic of probably the last 20 to 30 years is when they started looking at the increase in Alzheimer's and dementia from kind of across the globe, and it's because we're living longer, right? There's things. There's a whole bunch of people that are beating diseases and health problems that we're putting, my grandparents and my parents in the grave, right? Beating cancer, beating heart attacks, living longer and more successful with diabetes and kind of chronic health care. And so there's more 80-year-olds walking the planet these days than we've ever had in the history of mankind. And And so what do we do to ourselves along the way matters. And so 2/3 of it, of Alzheimer's and dementia is attributed to genetics. 1/3 of it is attributed to environmental factors. It's what we do to ourselves along the way. And there's 9 risk factors that they've broken that up into. The number one risk factor, and by far the largest risk factor of predicting if you're going to have Alzheimer's and dementia at 65, is your hearing status between 35 and 55. So it's your midlife. What you do to your ears early in life and midlife determines what ends up on the...
Right now for me. Yeah. Once they had that new, do you see that documentary, the Blue Zones or whatever, that came out?
Yeah.
People living, into their hundreds in these pockets around the world, and they were trying to figure out, So I think like each zone, it kind of had a corresponding relevance to, the way they walked up
What's
and
that
down. It's on Netflix, but they're called Blue Zones, and there's these pockets around the world where the percentage of people living to 100 or more, I believe, I didn't watch all of it, is higher though than everywhere else.
That's cool.
It's kind of
interesting.
wild.
And it's the pockets are the perfect word. It's like really small groups and communities.
Is the hearing, and he kind of touched on this, so for everybody listening, like your background getting into this, so you and David, but you both you're hearing doctors, basically.
Yep. Both audiologists. Yep. And
I think, what was it? I looked at, was it Central Michigan?
Yeah, go Chips. I got my. I got. I'm a Spartan boy. And then got my doctorate at.
But not
Central.
just So just kind of setting that foundation. So I mean, that's your guys' background. You were doctors. That's that's your thing. So, and then you developed this based off of your knowledge of the hearing and science. So, but one of my questions was. I don't even know if it's even, I'm sure you guys have obviously hearing studied all the time, but if everything was perfect, like nothing happened to you, but hearing loss as you get older, like is it just, it's kind of a formality. It's just going to happen, but, or I know factors play into it, like shooting and all that stuff, or loud music, or, maybe the wife yelling at you all the time. I don't know. But is like if you were the optimal level, like how long can you go with great hearing?
Yeah. Man, that's an awesome
Or
question.
does it just
So like,
trend?
if you really took care of your ears or like your hearing, would you have great hearing, until you're 90?
It doesn't go down?
I will tell you the human auditory system is not designed to just naturally degrade, right? It's not like muscle structure or like bone density and stuff like that. It is what we do to it along the way. Mm-hmm. That's why you always see it more predominantly in industrialized countries, right? More noise, more nutrition, it's more exposed to damaging effects, things like smoking, all that kind of stuff. Back when I was in graduate school, back in the late 80s, at that time they were doing studies in like the Amazon and the Himalayan mountains. And they would go to these before there was blue zones, and that was awesome that you brought that up. And they would find, again, people in their upper 90s, over 100, with perfectly normal hearing, right? And so but they've never been exposed to music. Everything was like a man-made instrument.
Yeah, no,
they didn't take take pharmaceuticals, right?
Oh yeah,
both recreational or
or over the counter.
Or over the counter. Yeah. You took herbs and you ate roots and berries for your medicines and like that kind of stuff. And so in the blue zones is very heavily skewed. My oldest daughter's a nurse, and she got to do an overseas study in Sardinia, which is one of the blue zones. And she went there just to study, the blue zone population. And the hearing was incredible. Like that's one of the things that they tested.
Really?
They were seeing all kinds of 80, 90-year-olds with hearing that's probably better than a lot of the guys sitting at this table right
Yeah, maybe.
here.
Yeah.
So it's pretty
Truly,
comfortable to say hearing loss is due to factors we do to ourselves, though.
Uh-huh.
It's not just part of getting old.
And the big thing with that is it's noise, and or actually we should. I'm kind of a big. It shouldn't be just noise, because noise is 100% my opinion. Noise is something that we have like a negative connotation towards, right? Like you don't want to hear noise, but what causes it's not noise that causes hearing loss, because it's sound that causes hearing loss. Because a lot of time, I mean, you have 7 guns go off in a blind. That's a lot of noise, but there's no negative connotation in our brains to that. We like that. That's right. That's not. Whereas like the same amount of industrial noise or factory noise, we wouldn't want to listen to, because it's not something. It's not pleasing to us. It's not fun. It's not engaging. Right. And so I think if we, part of this whole idea of like changing the conversation and changing the standard is like, let's not call it noise-induced hearing loss, because nobody wants noise. Nobody wants traffic noise. Nobody wants to live next to the airport and hear airplane noise all day, right?
But it's so cool to hear a concert.
Yeah.
Front row, and that the speakers are just
and your hair's blowing back, right? I mean,
Jeez.
But you don't. That's
you can't
not a
hear yourself
negative.
talk at that spot.
But it does not looked at as negative.
No.
And so I think those are
you
kind
know
of the
it.
things that we need to start
Yeah.
like looking at small changes like that. Like, so it's sound induced hearing loss, and honestly, it's a trade off between how long and how loud. It's duration versus intensity, right? And so, standing on a factory line for 8 hours a day, your ear can take a certain amount of noise stimulation, sound stimulation, before it needs to be protected, or standing in a duck blind, and in that duck blind, it's more the call. I mean, the firearm is very damaging, but it's the loud calling, because you're continuously in
It's the
2000.
decibel in which
Yep,
it's going out.
Yep.
Do you
And so
know offhand decibel levels of like Canada Goose call?
Like what
you're
calling?
You're in the 120s. The
Or-
specs probably a little bit louder than the Canada Goose call. Depends on short barrel, long barrel, flute, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like,
what's the decibel level to cause hearing damage?
Awesome question. Basically, your ear can be exposed to up to 85 decibels for 8 hours a day, and then after 85 decibels, that you have to you basically cut. For a very close rule of thumb is you cut your exposure time in half for every 5 decibels of that you increase.
Since it's Red Friday, when Arrowhead hit 142.2 decibels, that's probably not a great sound to be traveling through your canal.
It's for that length of time. You're right. What's interesting is like that's kind of the cutoff, and there's been a ton of confusion. That's why, Josh, it's a great question to talk about. Like everyone, a lot of hearing protection stuff on the market says that it clips off all sound above 85 dB. Well, you don't need to do that, because you're not listening to what's going on in a duck blind at that level for 8 hours, right? And so that's a part of why when we set out to build a better hearing experience before the protection is needed, part of all of our kind of our algorithms and our patents are built around how long. It's a timing, right? How long are you listening to how loud of the sound for a certain period of time? You need to get an impulse noise, this is per OSHA, below 140 decibels to be safe. And an impulse noise is considered 3 seconds or less. Okay, a gunshot is about 3 milliseconds. And so we don't need to get that gun blast from 158 down to 85. We just need to get it below 40 dB. And the ability to create an awesome listening experience and not get saturation, not get distortion, not get reverb, and all the bad stuff that goes on in kind of a low-end amplifier. The idea of being able to just shut it down to a safe level, or to take that that duck call that you're hammering, on a cut down, and it's 124 decibels, but you're blowing it on a 4-hour hunt, you're probably blowing it, 75, 80 minutes. And so all we got to do is take it from peaking at 125 decibels and get it to where it's safe at 112 or 110 or 115. We don't need to, and that's how we end up with a good listening experience, so that a young guy like Josh will now only hunt with something in his ears. Hopefully that's...
Well, he was saying that.
Let's put a note on that. So I've been using your product since 2019. I've actually tried the 60s and 90s, and now I'm in the customs. So I've had to try all the product line. And after the first season, I noticed that I could not hunt without hearing protection or shoot guns without hearing protection. It makes that big of a difference to my listening experience now, to where if I have somebody in the duck blind, I'm not wearing hearing protection, they shoot a gun, it actually hurts my ears. Like I can actually feel pain in my ears from that gunshot, where normally if you're not wearing hearing protection, it's just there. It's something
Right.
you're used to. But now that I've blocked it out for so many years, I've actually noticed that it
hurts.
it hurts, and it's like, okay, I gotta grab my hearing protection
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And part of it's what you get accustomed to and what you get trained to, right? And that's why I think it's so important that this message, that we've got to start handing it down generationally. Like one of the kind of marketing campaigns I've kicked around for a long time in my head is like, take everything but his ears, and it's this whole story about what you get from granddad, right? And you get his blue eyes, you get his personality, you get his smile, you get his love for fishing and hunting, and to be able to blow a duck call and a call and a turkey, and like all the stuff that we have super stereotypic, but what kind of a young boy falls in love with his grandfather, whoever that mentor is. Typically someone had to teach you to bring you into the hunting world, right? And this idea of like everything but his ears, right? And like the one thing that your generation needs to change is that you can't abuse your ears for 30, 40, 50, 60 years and end up okay in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? And we've got to start that. And honestly, the vision of the company is, if we can get people when they're having fun doing something that is obviously not good for their hearing, like pulling triggers, and get them to not accept that, to kind of get them where Josh is right now, that this just doesn't feel right. I know I'm doing something wrong, right? Like, and if we can kind of change that mindset when you're having a ball pulling triggers, then when you first time you pick up a chainsaw, the first time you're riding a loud side-by-side or using a grinder or on the tractor planting food plot, like we can carry it forward into the rest of our life, because I know that this story doesn't end well if I don't do it.
Yeah.
So Josh brought up 60s, 90s, and customs. We've been talking about all this. Could you go over what Tetra offers? I mean, I think the listener kind of understands what what you guys are
product
selling.
line, and then also like the programming that goes into it that makes it what it is.
Yeah, because me and Pat did this test, and you can get to that whenever you feel like it fits.
Pretty cool online, right?
Yeah.
Like it's I think it's probably one of the things that we probably don't talk about it enough, but or play it up enough. But it's truly a very scientific, fully calibrated hearing test online that you can go, and that's kind of where everything starts. The 6090 is different levels of technology, and we make it so that, and again, that's why we started Josh off with that. And he hadn't caused a lot of damage to his ears yet, and his hearing is normal. And the idea is that the 60 level technology is what we call a closed platform. We can't get in and adjust it for hearing loss. And so hopefully younger ears, not a lot of hearing loss. That's kind of where you start. The 90 level does two things. It's what we call an open platform, so we can program it for any amount of hearing loss that you have. You can get a 90 level in what we call the Alpha Shield or the Universal Fit, which we have some demos to show you guys later. That's where Josh started. And right now we've got almost 16,000 Alpha Shields out there, and we're still at over a 96% fit rate. And so the idea is that it fits very much like a big seashell, like a big sea, and it fits very well. 5 years ago, if you would have bet me $1,000 that you could fit 96 out of 100 ears with the same product, I would have absolutely said no way.
Right.
Every ear's too unique, and we've kind of blown that myth out of the water.
Wow.
Yeah, and something about the fit too on the Alpha Shield is that, like, people ask, like, has that ever fallen out? Or no, it you put it in and it stays in.
If it's in correctly, it won't fall out, right? It's kind of what we look at. And then, but a lot of, kind of the big new is, so we start with the hearing test, and then the other part is we ask, a few questions on, man, what do you do that's noisy, both hunting and outside of that? We're getting more and more programs for like land management and industrial, and we just had a custom cabinetry maker in Tennessee bought 6 sets for his employees, and we custom made them for. Part of it was a gift to the employees, and so they got 2 work programs and 2 hunting programs. They all hunt,
Really?
and so we could go through and the idea of like put something in there while they're in one shop, all making something noisy. Someone's running a bandsaw, someone's pounding, someone's hammering, someone and to be able to put a device in and to be able to communicate. Same talk track that we talk about in the blind, right? So that when his employees show up, they can put these in, and he shows that he, really cares about the longevity and the livelihood of his employees. But we made pursuit-based hearing systems, and probably the best explanation that I've kind of come on what's that is the idea of the waterfowl hunter has very different and very unique hearing needs and protective needs compared to the turkey hunter, compared to the deer hunter, elk hunter, upland hunter. And so what we have done is we've spent an enormous amount of time recording the sounds that you both need to hear, want to hear, or that you need to make as those different hunting pursuits, and the sounds that you don't need to hear, and certainly the ones that we need to block out, like the gunshot. And so best example is every sport has a ball, right? And that ball is designed to optimize the performance of that sport. You can shoot baskets with a soccer ball or a volleyball, but that basketball is always going to work better than that.
Sure.
Right? You can put various different balls on a golf tee and hit it with a driver, but that golf ball is always going to outperform, right? You kind of get where I'm going with all of that,
Sure.
right? And so we did the same thing for the ears. We said, this incredible warehouse behind me, and what you guys do, hunting is about as gear-driven of a sport as you can get, right? Like Josh doesn't duck hunt in his trout fishing waders in the middle of January, right? All of our gear. He made me look a little cute doing that, right? In the kayak.
Be frozen.
Be cold.
Come out like a popsicle.
But all of our gear for hunting is designed to optimize the performance and the comfort and the experience, and we're just treating the ear the same way, because a generic one-size-fits-all just doesn't work. In the hunting community just has poor acceptance of that.
So what did you do when developing the program for the waterfowl line?
So one of the coolest couple days of my life, because we got to sit down with Harold Knight in David's clinic. So Harold and David got to become good friends fishing bass tournaments up on Kentucky Lake, and at one, matter of fact, it was in 2017 at the Triton Owners Bass Tournament on Kentucky Lake, and Harold came up to David and did basically gave him that turkey's gobbling and I can't hear him no more. It's literally. And so we really kind of designed when we started the company, it was really about a product for the turkey hunter and a product for the waterfowl hunter, and kind of all through 2018. But we sat with Harold Knight, and he literally brought a box of duck calls and goose calls, Some of them were just his work, stuff he's made across the years. Some of it was commercially available. And we put a microphone down in his ear canal, down on his eardrum, and we made over 1,000 recordings of Harold Knight blowing a duck or a goose call. And then you take those 1,014 recordings and you run it through all kinds of spectral analysis, and you come up and you say, with 98% reproducibility, take those 1,000 recordings and blend it out and produce one spectral output of that. Take all of them, add them together, and where's all the commonalities that are the enhanced part of that sound, whether it was a Canada goose call or a speck or a mallard or pintail, a whistle, doesn't matter. What are the most important qualifications that all of those 1,000 recordings have in common? And that's literally how we got our first patent, was reproducing that, so that our formula, our algorithm for the waterfowl hunter is there's a handful of critical bands that we enhance to allow that call to come through naturally, because that's exactly, if you have nothing in your ear, this is what it sounds like at the eardrum of Harold Knight. And that's how we got to know the Higdon guys, and that's when I first got to meet Brooke Richard and Kyle Jones and Boone Barton and Bo Brooks and all those guys. Is we went up and spent we went up once a week for a month and sat with them while we had them hooked up to our programming software, and Brooke just sat there and wailed on a spec call. Kyle Jones wailed on a goose call, right? And we just kept changing it, and they're like, no, it's flat, it's too much, or that's too high, it sounds, too tinny. And until when they went, stop, don't change it.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so it was when it sounded good through the Tetra with them, and then that's when we baked our final formula. And that's the very first version that you got, Josh, right there. So
Sweet.
Then we just go down and you replicate that. Like an upland, what you need on a dove hunt is completely different than what you need in a flooded timber hunt. And what you need for the upland hunter, we digitized Garmin e-collars and cowbells, because you need to be able to hear your dogs and locate them when they're in thick cover and you can't see them when they're working. We digitized pheasant flush, chucker flush, quail flush.
Oh, really?
And so like those right, that all has a very common spectral sound spectrum.
And is that's the STO you guys talk about on your website, the specialized target optimization?
100%. You did your homework well.
So
how do you
I like
select that?
the flush sound. Like, where are you getting those sounds at?
So some of it was actually real
like
birds,
a game farm. You're recording them out there.
You can certainly do that, but you wouldn't believe the amount of sound spectrum. From a marketing standpoint, you can go and get about any damn picture in the world that you ever want, right? There's kind of the equivalent for
I guess
sounds.
it's kind of like, remember when we were on the dock and you needed fishing sounds,
fishing commercials, and me and Pat were left in the
so
dock.
I was just like,
Everybody else was out on the boat, and we're
setting the hook, like
I'm running
hearing
around
that
with
line
with this actually recorder, and he's catching a fish, get it all on audio
or you
recording.
can hear like a whopper plopper style bait
to the water
through the
and all
water.
that
Or
stuff.
something. So that's kind of the same thing.
That would
You're
be a
just
cool
kinda-
sound, right?
Yeah.
Well, so it's interesting that you go with that. One of so the brand, what we're talking about, the only thing Josh has ever seen is Tetra Hearing, right? And there's a meaning behind Tetra, but the official company is Soundtrack Outdoors. And the idea behind the naming of Soundtrack Outdoors is that we all share, and there's a soundtrack for all parts of our lives, right? Like as a waterfowl hunter or turkey hunting community, like we all, you end up with a bunch of turkey hunters. If you had 5 turkey hunters and 5 non-hunters, and all of a sudden a gobble goes off and 1,000 yards away, the turkey hunters are going to hear it and respond to it because it's part of their soundtrack of their life, right? Like you have our grandmother's voice, our mother's voice is a soundtrack of our life. Our wedding song, favorite song, best song, whatever. Like we build these soundtracks that define our life, and so it's literally when you did the whopper plopper, like I know exactly what that sounds like in my head, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Going through the water.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like, that's part of our soundtrack, right? And so we try to be super meaningful with stuff like that, and then we went with the brand name Tetra, and Tetra comes from the tetrapods, and it's the most well-documented scientific evolution. It was the sea mammals to land mammal, or sea animals, mostly reptiles, fish and reptiles, that evolved and became land creatures that became mammals, right? Like this is from an scientific evolutionary process, the tetrapods. And, when they stopped needing lateral lines to feel vibrations and they had to hear sound waves on land, they needed an eardrum that would vibrate to a sound wave versus a lateral line that they would feel from a vibration in the water. And they had to be able to communicate. And so what we're looking to do is to evolve, as I've already kind of said before. We want to set a new standard, that this is what, responsible hunting looks like. About protecting the ears in some way, and so it's this evolutionary process that we're, trying to create. And so it's a big lofty vision, but it's with purpose, that we want to evolve the industry from particularly how new people are exposed to it.
Yeah, because the Tetra Hearing, so it does two things that we all want. It's enhancing sounds, and then it's also doing or listening. Or you guys call it clear comm for like talking.
Yep.
But also suppresses shots and stuff like that. So separating you all, is it the STO? Is that kind of what separates Tetra from other people out there, or what other? Obviously, there's tons of, we talked, in-ear hearing aid style stuff to help you go hunting, but it's that targeting the different sounds animals make.
100%, Patrick. It's that STO, specialized target optimization. Like we're going after specific targets and optimizing the hearing experience. I like to call it pursuit-based hearing, right?
Yeah.
And so like what you need, what you need to be able to blow a duck call is completely different hearing and protective needs than what you need as a turkey hunter sitting in the woods. And even as a turkey hunter sitting in the woods is different than a deer hunter. We put in, I keep feeling like feels like the most like academic podcast I've ever done. We keep going back into like kind of dorky science stuff, but it's a part of what makes us
cool
very
stuff.
different.
Yeah.
What we know from 100 years of hearing science is that how our brain localizes sound in the horizontal plane. Right. So if my butt's on the ground, my back's against a tree in the springtime, and I'm looking to hear, gobbles or approaching birds or clucks or yelps or kikis, right? We can go through and we digitized all those sounds, and so we are amplifying the 7 frequencies that make a gobble 22 times more than we're amplifying boots walking through leaves, right? We've digitally recorded all of that, and the turkey hunting's all about sound, right? It's all about this cool romance story that's kind of going on in the woods between the boys and the girls,
spitting and drumming.
Yeah, like
and
all that.
How many sounds can you add to, let's just say, the Alpha Shield or whatever? But like if someone says, okay, I need one for turkey, deer, upland,
so we have a multi-pursuit device. We can put up to 6 different. We put up to 6 different programs.
Okay.
Or 6 different STOs.
Pursuits and stuff.
Pursuits.
Oh,
exactly.
That's actually quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
so we have.
You'll be getting after it.
If you still need another bullet after 6 choices of how you want to hear, something's
You can buy
something's not
another
going
one,
that
and
well.
then you get two Alpha Shields.
So I think
a set with 6 and a set with 6.
Yeah, mine's set up for waterfowl boost, upland, turkey, range. That's it. That's it.
Okay.
So when you press the button changing the settings, there's a voice prompt and it says waterfowl boost.
So what's waterfowl boost?
Does that make you
it's a
kill
volume
more
change.
ducks?
So
Yeah.
essentially, you don't get to float another shell. That's not what it is. Okay, so don't get any ideas out there.
You don't miss.
There's 3 of them, right? There's Waterfowl Magnum.
Yep. And so on the Alpha Shield, there's not a volume control, and so we built the volume into
Profiles.
Waterfowl Boost, Waterfowl Magnum. So it's kind of like Volume 3, Volume 6, Volume 9.
Yeah.
On the custom products, when we do a custom form fitting product, there's an independent volume wheel on each side. So you can select the different pursuit programs and then adjust for each ear.
Yeah. So I took this test, and it said, here you can read that, but what the 0 to 20 or whatever.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah. And I don't know where to find the graph, but I think after my graph looked like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but that's what it looked like.
So this is like, so what we're looking at on paper here is a graph with 4 circles, which I'm pretty impressed, Chandler. That's a good memory there.
I mean, I remember seeing the graph and looking at it, and I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah,
and then I was like trying to find it back on my email, but I just remember what the graph meant. But
you kind of look at, this is kind of goes back to your good question, Patrick, about like what goes on with the human auditory system. Does it just kind of fall apart and degrade, or what I really have never liked in the profession that we do, like we'll say, oh, Mr. Jones, you have hearing that's normal for a 70-year-old, right?
yeah.
Well, that normal for a 70-year-old may be a 40 or 50 decibel loss,
Yeah.
right? But like, here's the problem: is like when Mr. Jones goes home and tells Mrs. Jones, all he heard is like, well, my hearing's normal for my age,
Oh yeah.
right? I don't need to do anything about it,
Yeah.
like, and so it's been a part of like medical reports that have always driven me nuts. Like,
Really? It's not.
It should be you have a 40% loss, which is
Yeah.
typical of a 70-year-old or someone your age,
But
or
it's
something
not
like
great.
that. But like, doesn't
Right.
mean that it's normal. You're a long ways from normal.
Yeah.
But kind of what you're looking for is 0 to 25 is normal hearing
Yeah.
on that graph. And what we try to do with that is to show those are different frequencies. And what's super cool, back in my whole hearing aid days, it was everything. We hung all of our hats on speech understanding. And what's super cool is that you don't need to understand a yelp or a spitting and drumming or a gobble or a comeback call or a bugle or a bark or a mew, like whatever sounds. You just need to be able to hear it. You need to be able to localize it. And
Yeah.
it's so much cooler to not have to worry about, without hearing aids, Mr. Johnson, you understand 47% of speech. And look, with your $6,000 hearing aids, you now understand 82% of speech. Isn't that great, right? And Mr. Johnson's like, well, yeah, but when I wear them out on the golf course, I can't hear my buddies, right? Or when I try to wear these, I love to turkey hunt in the spring. Oh, you can't wear your hearing aids while you're hunting. Like, that's not a good idea. And so literally, that's what we were trying to do, is just take everything we've been doing for the last 20 years in the musical and in the musician industry and in hearing aid advancement, and try to make a really cool device, for the hunter that is designed for a specific pursuit of hunting. And
Yeah.
So is it three, like if someone was shopping for Tetra, is there 3 different options? Is that what I was finding? So
The product line.
the product line. Thank you. Yeah.
Gosh, dang.
I was trying to
Do
figure
you
out
work
how-
in this industry or what?
Custom
Retail,
Shield,
retail?
Alpha Shield. What's the amp pod?
So the amp pod's another, so I'm going to throw an A. So really what you're talking about there in my world is the form factor, right? It's part of it defines the product line, but the Custom Shield, the Alpha Shield, and the amp pod are 3 form factors. It's how it fits into the ear.
Okay.
It's the design of the shell and the shape. And
Okay.
so the Custom Shield is obviously custom formed and custom made. We take a cast of your ear, then we build a shell that fits your ear and only your ear. The Alpha Shield and the Amp Pod are 2 universal fits. And the Alpha Shield, anytime you see the word shield, it's about that the number one thing of that product is about protecting the ear. And so I look at it, Custom Shield, Alpha Shield is about heavy trigger pulls or lots of noise. If you're wearing it for land maintenance stuff or anything that we would design for an industrial use setting. The The amp pod is really about it's a small little pod that amps up the experience and the amplified experience. And so in that note, it's more about single shot activities, right? So this is for our big game products, and mostly it's for our turkey hunters. And so it provides shot suppression, but it doesn't fully seal the ear canal. And so we don't allow it to be sold for things that are heavy trigger pulls, right? Or lots
you
of
wouldn't
noise.
be selling that to duck hunters.
Here's the answer to that is no. I want to be very clear about that. That's no. But here's the problem. Here's the catch-22 on that, and this is what frustrates me: is that in the ear is probably 85% better than having nothing in the ear.
Nothing in the ear,
right? And so with the Shield products, we can say that you're 100% protected.
No.
And you're somewhere probably between 85 and 90%, 10 to 15% vulnerable of getting too much noise with the amp pod.
Okay.
Depends how it fits your ear.
Right.
The problem is that duck hunters would love it because you don't seal off your ear. And I'm not recommending it. I'm not promoting it. We're not going to sell it to duck hunters. But if it was to use that or nothing, 100 times I'm putting that in someone's ear. If you show up. If Josh was going to show up and say, "Man, I forgot my custom shields in the truck, and I don't have anything to wear," and I had a set of amp pods, I'm putting the amp pods in his ear,
Right.
hands down, right? Because it's going to be better than anything.
We got to protect them lobes.
So on those amp pods or turkey and elk and what all that like single shot stuff, maybe a listener might think like, when you're hearing this gobble or hearing this bugle, do you know directionally where that is? Like, does it? You know exactly what hillside, what ridge?
Well, 100%, that's the whole purpose of it, is to bring back those auditory cues, and we do that by correcting for hearing loss, right? Especially most guys that have had, a fair amount of birthday cake, at least, 50 times or so, right? Their own birthday cake. You end up with most males have asymmetrical hearing loss. That their hearing loss is larger or more significant in one ear versus the other. A lot of that comes from shooting guns, right? You always get the dangerous side of the gun is the muzzle blast, right? And so a right-handed shooter, unprotected, will always have more hearing loss in their left ear. In general, males tend to have more hearing loss opposite of their dominant hand, because you think about how you hold a weed eater, how you hold a chainsaw, how you push a board through a table saw. Like you tend to position yourself. Your control is your dominant hand that's protecting your body, like controlling the throttle of the chainsaw or the throttle of the weed eater, and it usually puts that. And when you stand, you just kind of cock your head a little bit, and so that your left ear almost always gets more exposure if I'm right-handed.
So using power tools, you need to switch between right and left-handed.
You need to be ambidextrous. Right? You need to be a switcher on that.
Even that out.
Remember that.
Or you could wear some hearing protection.
Yeah.
About it. Either way.
That's true.
I do have one question for you, Bill. As a hearing doctor, not as a Tetra person, I see a lot of guys running around with AirPods in their ears. Has there been any studies on how that's affecting people's hearing?
A ton.
Like just constant music?
Yeah, just people constantly have AirPods in their ears. Like I see it more than when they were corded. If they had cords, people would take them in and out all the time. But now people are just running around
like
AirPods
full
all the
day.
time. Full day.
Even just plugged in, but yes, it's even gone, the next level because it is wireless now. And so for the last, I think it's up to 15 years now. I know it's over 12. Where that study comes from, Josh, is the incoming Air Force and Navy cadets are all tested. And so that's how they're judging the hearing. So the fastest growing group of hearing loss by population in the U.S. is the teenage years. And so it's at north of 12, less than 20, right? And it's because, you think about the last 15 years, like those kids are constantly plugged in. And like rarely, and even it's not just teenagers, right? We all are.
Sure.
And but
there's not just music; it's video games too. Like anything that we're
the
all.
ears never get a rest, right?
No.
Like I just said, my son Brendan's turning 20 like the amount of things that were in his ears in his teenage years compared to mine. I mean, you guys don't remember. I remember when that frickin' Sony Discman came out, the Walkman, right? And, right? And like, you could put your cassette tapes in that. It was like the coolest frickin' thing in the world.
Or like when the first iPod came out.
I remember those. Just those headphones back in the day. Oh man,
the ones with the foam on.
Yeah, the foam.
Yeah,
and they never fit.
No. But then when you'd lose one of the foam things, you'd have the hard plastic on your ear. Yep.
But as much as Dr. Dre doesn't want to hear, I mean, you're less likely to be carrying around Beats headphones as compared to those little Apple iPods or Bose or fill in the blank, right? And so it's hard to find someone that's not plugged in constantly. There's a lot of belief and hope that, looking forward 20, 30 years down the road in the hearing aid industry, that having an ear level device won't be a big deal anymore, because you now have a couple generations that have grown up with seeing that people just wear things in their ear, right? Like today's generation of 55 to 85-year-olds didn't grow up with someone wearing things in their ear all the time. And so this idea of, and that's why there's just this natural aversion towards God forbid we can put on we have 4 different sets of glasses that you wear with different outfits, or because you want like the smart librarian look versus the sultry sexy look of some other types of glasses, right? Any young person is comfortable wearing glasses, but if you tell a 68-year-old that all right, Mrs. Smith, it's time that you need to start wearing a hearing aid. Well, I'm not old enough for a hearing aid.
Yeah. Aesthetically, they just don't want to.
Yeah. And the equivalent of that on the hearing protection side is that somehow, like in those generations, before us, it was like somehow a dent to your ego, right? That you were less of a man if you wore earplugs or ear protection. And I mean, I've heard that across my career a million times. You're considered a sissy if you put earplugs in your ear, right?
Yeah.
How the hell does that come? Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like just doesn't make sense.
But you ask anybody after a duck hunt, they're like, "Yeah, I got my ears wrong."
No.
Yeah.
Like it's a badge of honor, like from a Woodstock concert or something like that, right? Like it's like, this one night at Metallica and Motley Crue. For like today's generation of, they're like, I remember when, in 82 when it happened.
Yeah.
And,
it was an astounding stat you guys put up, and who knows, it might be more than that, but it was 86% of hunters don't wear hearing protection. That's wild.
And that that was the low side. That was like the conservative. Is in the 80s.
Right.
There were some studies that showed that there were. There's a few different studies over a 12-year period. They're doing it every 4 years, and all 4 years in a row, it came to where over 90% of adults were choosing to not wear any hearing protection in situations that they absolutely knew was not good for their ears.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of it was around
and I think
concerts
it's like
and music.
At least in the hunting side, and even me too, because I'm there, not wearing the hearing protection. It's not even a thought when you're gathering your stuff to pack for that day, right? You need your bow or gun, or else you're not going to get anything. And then what camo you're wearing, and then snacks.
Little Debbie's.
And but then that probably crosses a lot of people's mind. It's just not
on that checklist.
It's not on the checklist.
No, it's not on the checklist at all.
It's hard. It's not on my waterfowl checklist, but it's on my dove checklist.
Especially if you haven't suffered hearing loss and you're still have good hearing, then you don't.
Well, I think part of it is
it's like going on a diet. I'm not going on a diet until now I might need to go on a diet.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
That's how you talk.
And that's when you think about eating healthy.
Yeah.
After you've gotten to the point.
Well, hearing protection in the past is just kind of taken away from the immersion of a hunt, and now there's options available that don't take away from that immersion.
And you don't need the over the ear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's
Yeah.
just like second
It's
thought.
not in the way.
You
You're
put
not
it in.
packing this, you know.
Done.
And so, I mean, you guys you're spot on. That's 100%. You know, that's why this is my third city this week, and I absolutely want to get here and take advantage of this
Yeah.
opportunity, because it's these types of relationships of you know, of having these discussions right now, and then you know, three young guys on both sides of me here that are hopefully carry a lot of that with them and start to
Yeah.
start to look at it. And
Right.
you know, whether or not, that's why you will never ever see anyone affiliated with Tetra that downplays any type of hearing protection, right? Foam plugs, earmuffs, any competitor. We do nothing but high fives and knuckles with that. Like, keep it up, right?
Sure.
Just do something. If you're looking for a different experience, if you're looking for something, you're looking for the next step, like, we'd love to have that conversation with you. But like,
Yeah.
it is always, we promote protecting the ear at all times when you can in any way, and we will always do that. We don't throw any shade on any type of hearing protection, because it's
Sure.
not used. And when you're, again, what we're struggling every day, and I intentionally use the word struggling because it's not easy. You know, I fully understand the biggest reason that it's not on that essential gear list, Patrick, is for at least for Tetra right now, that I can get behind, is cost. Right, and it is. I mean, right now our prices start at $749, and yes, we run specials and we run promos, and there's going to be a Black Friday sale and all that good stuff, right? But it's expensive, but it's not disproportional to the other investments that go on, particularly for a waterfall hunter. And I say that I said earlier that we're struggling. Our biggest struggle is like, how do we produce a great listening experience that is consistent with the brand, you know, that we've built in the last 4 or 5 years at a lower cost. And I'm telling you, it's not easy. I mean,
No.
the reason it ain't cheap is because it ain't cheap to start with. And but we're trying. That's our number one goal, is to get a youth model out and to get like an early career hunter out. It's a whole lot easier. Earlier this year, we released a Bluetooth system that's really kind of insane. It's an absolute unbelievable premium sound system. It's half in the ear musician monitor. It's got a triple driver system, uncompressed full streaming Bluetooth. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. It is so much easier to make sound great than it is to make a low cost device sound good.
Yeah.
Right. And just because it's hard isn't a good excuse. I used to say it to my kids all the time. Like, you don't not do something just because it's hard.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll figure it out. But honestly, that's where we spend most of our R&D meetings on.
You wear these, you don't have to use that hearing insurance as much. It'll cost a lot more than $750.
You can spend $1,000 now or $7,000 later. Right?
Yeah.
But
And they're not disposable. I mean, you're gonna have these for a long time.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're backed with a lifetime warranty, aren't they, Bill?
Well, lifetime's a big word.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're
What's the
100%.
warranty
They're
on
100% repairable, so it's unconditional for the first 365 for the first year. Like, we replace it, repair it. Everything is a fully repairable device. We will have a 10-year warranty to be able to repair any current device. When we released the Bluetooth this February at the NWTF show, when we released that, I made what was very scary, but kind of it's turned out to be a big decision, that we created a buyback program. And so we kind of have like a trade in, trade up, where we will give you a credit for your functioning, well-kept device up to 3 years, and give you a credit if you're going to either go from a 60 to a 90, or an Alpha Shield to a Custom Shield, or a single pursuit to a multi-pursuit. We try, and I think we do a good job. I know I'm blessed to have some absolute awesome customer service guys and gals with me right now, and they do an unbelievable job. Every customer is like family, like truly. They treat and matter of fact, I'm probably the worst at like downplaying or downselling. You know, someone will come in and they'll say like, "Well, I need that multi-pursuit." All right, well, what do you? Man, I just I hunt. I do some dove hunting. I'm mostly a waterfowl hunter. I shoot some sporting clays, and you know, I'll go on a trip, you know, every couple of years out to South Dakota for pheasants. And you don't hunt deer? No. You don't hunt turkeys? No. Like, okay, like, well, we can put you in our wing shooter. That's 4 programs instead of 6 programs, and it saves you $350. Well, I know, but that having 6 programs would be pretty cool. If you don't use them, it's not.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm always kind of like, we do a very good job of trying to figure out exactly what you need, where do you have the most success, and then we try very hard that the sale you make today isn't carved in stone by any means. If you got a single pursuit and you hit a Montana elk tag next year, you know, send it in, and for a small upgrade, we can build our elk program for your hearing loss, right? And try to treat it like we want to be treated, right?
Yeah.
So,
and you do the 30-day, almost like a trial.
It really
deal
is
where you can get them, and if for some reason you're like, it's not my thing.
Spot on. And like we need to come up with a better name. We try to do like test drive, I think, is probably the closest to what we've come, but it is trial period. It's exactly what it is.
Right.
And it's your confidence of you go hunt with it, you use it. And truly, I tell every single customer, if you don't say this is the best thing I've done for myself in a long time, then let's talk about it. We either need to fix it and make it better. At the end of the day, you get 100% of your money back. Doesn't matter if it's a custom product. Doesn't matter how much custom programming we did to it, how much time we got invested into it. If you don't love it, we want to fix it, or you get your money back. And so,
that's cool. I love it. Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Yep.
Well, I can't wait.
You know, it's number one, thank you for saying that, and thank you guys have asked some freaking awesome questions, and to be able to have Josh, you know, sitting right here at the table with he was one of the first that it was in his ears, and he's done unbelievable work. He's in front of in front of the right customers when we look about making meaningful change. And on the big picture, that's the whole reason why we're here and why we're looking to partner with Rogers to begin with. Is it's the same, you know, type of mentality, and the same. It's, you know, family owned. This is a very, some of the innovation that I just saw back on in this is unreal from a pick and fulfillment delivery standpoint. I've wrote a lot of checks and ran through a Visa card here for a whole lot of years. And now I see why all of a sudden it ends up on my doorstep 2 or 3 days later.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We've always wanted to have the fastest shipping we can possibly get.
But hearing the story of how everything starts with with Jim Rogers and Steve and Stevie and Shannon, and this has been a very cool day. I'm going to tell you one of the highlights will be when I got to meet Madison, which I think is Stevie's niece, and
Shannon's daughter.
And she's working on trying to build a cool Richardson Tetra hat, right?
Yeah,
and that you guys will be selling, and when we left, and she was so proud to show it to me. She's working her butt off in college still, and it's got some big plans. But when we were walking out, and like I just overheard her say before I walked out of the room, she said, "Papa, look at this," right? Because Steve Rogers is standing there, and just like that was a cool moment. Here his granddaughter is sitting at the desk in the office, contributing to the company, and that's exactly the type of brand and the type of people that we want to surround ourselves with at Tetra. And the idea is we can't get in front of all the consumers. Everyone here, the Rogers brand has won the respect of the outdoor community and the outdoor consumer. And to be able to have this platform, be able to get this kind of messaging out and the kind of the work that we're going to do together with Patrick and Chandler. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pumped. Seriously.
Yeah. Me and Pat are going to invest in our ears here. But
Right, yeah.
so we've kind of talked about
Yeah.
we're going to tease when we're going to have that, that page up and running. When do you think? Any guess?
I think it's going to be real quick. My 8 o'clock call today was that everything's on target and ready to go.
Cool.
I'm not going to jinx it by putting a day or a date on it,
don't
but
put a date on it,
it's
but-
going to be very soon. So
Cool.
I'm excited.
Everybody listen, look out
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
We'll do
Yeah,
some
keep an eye out.
social media
For
stuff
sure.
about that. Let everybody know.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated and make sure everybody's on board. So
No.
It's not the super sexy. It's not a new gun. It's not a faster boat motor, right? It's not a 2 foot bigger boat or a $5,000 pup or whatever. All the stuff we put, but man, in the big scheme of life, it will pay back in spades. The longer you can keep what the good Lord gave us working well. I've spent my last 30 years kind of trying to restore the delight of hearing and reintroduce sound back to dormant brains. We talked about, and even this, there's a certain amount of dorkiness with this, right? It's not it's not the new shell, but that we're talking about it and that you guys are spending time and allowing us to have the platform is where the important change starts. And so I really look up to that.
But it is a gift that keeps on giving, because in 20 years from now, you're still going to be able to hear that gobble on opening day of turkey season. So, and wouldn't that stink not to be able to go, like you go at turkey hunting, you can't hear the turkey gobble? That's the whole experience.
That's why you go turkey hunting.
I mean, well, here's the bad part.
So-
and actually, so what you do is you quit going. Right, you quit living the life that you want to live, and when you quit
I
going,
can't hear him anymore.
Now you're not hanging out with your friends and your hunting buddies, and now you're not telling the stories, at the Applebee's on steak night, right? And it's not, and if you don't have hearing loss, and that's where a lot of when we tie it, it's not that this damage to our filter system in our ear automatically causes dementia, right? It's the whole package that comes with that.
Yeah.
If you're struggling to hear, you become less social, and if you become less social and less engaged and less connected, and if it's too hard, you stop going to the grandkids' games and their events, and now you're sitting in the corner at Thanksgiving dinner, and no one's talking to Grandpa and then you get less stimulation, and that's what builds, and then you become depressed, and again it just becomes this big thing of like. That's how you end up with the high correlate of the majority of people with dementia and Alzheimer's are also connected with hearing loss. And so it's like, it's not a one-to-one relationship by any means, and we will never present that, but it is a package that comes together. And if you're jacking up your ears as a 25-year-old duck hunter and you also love to turkey hunt, chances are you're not going to be having very good turkey days 40 years down the road. Or
no doubt.
So
no doubt. That's cool.
All right.
That's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah,
That's
Josh.
right. Josh?
Or Patrick, who's ending it?
Patrick's got it.
Well, okay.
He's getting better at it. He needs practice.
Yeah.
oh wow, there sounds like a story behind that.
I know. Usually I just let
Well, if
Josh
you guys
do it.
enjoyed this
But
podcast, be sure to
if
leave
you-
us a rating.
Yeah. Leave a rating. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Make sure you check us out on all of our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the good stuff. So you can keep up to date on all of our new videos, product reviews, podcasts, all that stuff. So make sure you check it out. Like and comment. Spread the word. Tetra is in the building. Let everybody know that it'll be coming soon to Rogers Sporting Goods. So with that, have a good week, and we will see you all next time. Peace out.
I think it's time for me